Hey everybody, it's Matt Michaels here
We just
with
started
DJ.
talking.
I'm here with DJ Impact and with the amazing Christina Arquette, who,
Yes.
okay, you're married to David Arquette, but really what I really find fascinating about you and your journey is that you're now producing some really good content, you know?
Mhm.
You.
Some of the stuff that you guys are putting out is amazing.
Thanks.
And as we've been kind of talking here and chatting a little bit to start, one of the things is that when you want to, I say, invigorate yourself, you have to take those challenges. And that's what I respect David for doing, is taking that challenge and refinding that spark as a performer.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because, I think,
He's obviously crazy though. No, I'm kidding. He's also like, there's I kind of always tell the story that people were like, well, how did this come about? Like, why did he decide to do this again? And I'm like, because he's literally like crazy. Like, it was deep down into his heart and soul that, 20 years ago, he really upset fans in something that he thought was just a tremendous opportunity as a fan of wrestling, right? Like, he was so excited. It was like a fan getting the belt for a day, and he just thought it was so cool. But then when we first started dating, and I went to a wrestling event with him at the Staples Center, WWE, and people were like spitting on him. They hated him, and they were like, David Arquette. I was like, God, I've never seen so much hate in my life. Like, but I mean, it's part of the culture, which I love about wrestling. But, that hate was like pretty real from a lot of people, including wrestlers. It wasn't just the fans. And so when David, he was about 50 pounds overweight, and his health was deteriorating, and he had a bad reaction to a stress test. This was 3 years ago. And he ended up having to have 2 stents put in his heart. And when he was in the hospital, he didn't think about me. He didn't think about his children. He thought about wrestling. And he came out of his heart surgery and he said, oh, I really love you, but I really need to, I thought I almost died, and I thought about my life, and I thought I have had a great life. My family loves me. I've done some projects I love, some projects maybe not so much, or, and he's like, but the one thing that has just really tugged at my heartstrings is wrestling. And so I was like, you're nuts. First off, you have 2 stents in your heart, which is, scary. And, you're 50 pounds overweight, and, he was drinking and smoking at the time, and not my favorite thing. And so, I just thought the whole thing was nuts. And he put his mind to it, and he decided, he called DDP, and he started DDPY immediately. And that was like the beginning of his transformation. And he called Peter Avalon. And I always ask Peter, like, what was that like when David called you? Would you think it was a joke? And he's like, kind of, but I showed up and said, can you train me? And that journey really began. That's how it all began. It was literally a near-death experience in the hospital.
I want to ask you though, Christina. So clearly, you wanted him to not be a part of this, to stop doing this, but at the same time, you wanted to support his goal. How challenging was that for you to kind of go stop, but continue?
Yeah, it was, both Coco and I were like, Coco's teenage angst in the beginning of the film is one of my favorite things, where she's like, oh, Dad, you look like a wizard. Like, what are you whispering?
Yeah.
And Courtney, his ex-wife, is like, oh, he's a wizard. It's just so funny to me like that. It is a bit of a joke, and you're sort of like, oh my God, what are you doing? And so that part, and then, for me, the stakes were high because of his health problems, right? So I was like, but David's an artist, and he's from a family of artists, and he's also got this long lineage of vaudeville performers, and like, wrestling is theater on steroids, right? Like, it's such a performance, and it's real. It's not fake, because if you can break your neck doing it, it's not fake. Right. And so, like, it's very pageanty too. Like, David loves, if you come in our closet, his side looks like my side, but it's his side because it's all bedazzled and furs and like all his wrestling outfits, and mine's just like jeans and t-shirts. But and like, it's very pageant, and he loves like the whole experience of it. So I always knew if it wasn't going to be wrestling, he would be doing it in some other, thing. And so there was a part of me that was like, okay, well, he's going to go do this, and he's going to get really healthy, which he did. He lost 50 pounds, he quit drinking, he quit smoking, took really good care of himself. And then there was, a part of me that was the concerned wife. But, I used to be a news reporter in my previous career. And when I had our 2 kids, I left to become a stay-at-home mom for a while. And I did that, and I loved it, but I always wanted to get back to my roots of news and producing. And I always loved docs. And so part of my other kind of ulterior motive during this whole thing too was like, really, as a producer, I saw the tremendous value in the story too. I knew there was a beautiful hero's journey in this story. And so, I reluctantly, it took a little bit of convincing, but I ended up coming on board to produce it. And a fun fact, our very first shoot that happened was in Detroit at the Legends of Wrestling show, when the Nasty Boys got into a bar fight with David and threw one of our cameras across the bar.
Oh, shit.
Oh, yeah. And so the 2 directors, David Darg and Price James, are lifelong best friends, huge wrestling fans, like love wrestling. And David Darg's an Oscar nominee, huge, amazing documentarian. Price comes from commercial and comedy. And so they're kind of, together, they were a great combination. But I'll never forget, they called me and they were like, Jerry Sachs threw our camera across the bar, and like, and Brian Knobs was really upset with us. And I was like, well, what do you mean? That was the first shoot. And literally, like, the hate was real for David. And it literally was the first shoot. So when we set out on this journey, we were like, we don't know how this is going to end. It could end in a near-death experience, which literally it almost did, with Nick Gage. But yeah, that was the very beginning of this documentary, and so that set the tone for the whole thing.
Right.
When you're in one of the best spots and worst spots because of the fact that we establish you're a wife, but you're also a producer. So when you're crafting the story, once it gets into post, and you're looking at the arc of the journey, what was it that brought you to the idea of starting with Ken Anderson and finishing with you guys in that Macho Man Elizabeth moment? And on top of that, then heartstring moment of bringing Luke Perry into the literal end of the film. Even just thinking about it, it really hits me, because you did a great job in forming that arc to not only are we emotionally invested in David and your relationship, but then the relationship of David and Luke, and then Jack coming into it.
Love
it
Jack
just like,
so much.
Yeah,
He's such a star, Jack, by the way.
Oh,
Our kids are obsessed with Jack. Our 2 boys are always like running around. They're like, I'm Jungle Boy. I'm like, Jungle Boy. I'm the president of his fan club. He is amazing. It's really interesting. It happened very organically. A lot of people, I think because wrestling is wrestling, and that one scene with RJ where we do show the behind the scenes, like the making of that moment, which was, I thought a little controversial. Kind of the new school of wrestlers are like, yeah, show it. Old school might not be so into that. But a lot of it happened really organically. It wasn't really choreographed, right? Like that first shoot that happened, an actual bar fight did break out. And in our minds, we were like, listen, if this time next year, the Nasty Boys would accept David, that would be the ultimate ending to this story. Like, that's kind of what we thought when this, first shoot happened. And then, the 2 directors when David did Ready to Rumble, backyard wrestling was starting to become a big thing during that time. So he always kind of wanted to start on the route of like where wrestling's been and kind of where he had left off, and after Ready to Rumble. So that Virginia scene, was obviously encompassed that kind of backyard vibe and feel. David's originally from Virginia. He was raised on a commune, so it like meant a lot to do it in Virginia. And then sort of the trajectory after that, he and RJ met on Twitter and started to have banter with each other on Twitter. And that was a really organic relationship that began. And, in the mental, David was kicked out of the editing room. I had to kick him out because he was too close to the story.
Right.
And, some of the beginning, in the first act, like the mental health stuff was really tough for him to watch. And we didn't want to be exploitative with it. We wanted to be real and raw because, David's always been an open book. And I think now more than ever, we're talking about mental health, and that's really important. And, I think it's a lot of times in the world that we live in, you can see people on the internet or on social media or in magazines. You're like, oh my God, that guy is a this or that girl's a this. And to really show who David is as a person, all the, layers and the struggles and, the flaws, both good and bad, that was really important. And that was all really organic. Like the ketamine scene, we didn't have cameras there for that scene. Actually, and this is a great answer to your earlier question, as the wife, I was there with him, supporting him. As the producer, I was calling the directors and like, we need to go shoot another ketamine scene because this is really interesting what's going on. So it was like this weird kind of sort of doing both roles. But, David went on the indie scene for a year. A lot of that didn't make the film because it just, didn't have enough room for it. But he and RJ went all over the country and in Canada and everywhere. And, then leading up into the death match was not planned. I think it was Joey Janela or somebody fell out right before because of an injury and asked David to fill in for him. We weren't even going to shoot that night. And our directors were both out of town. And I called one of them and I was like, you have to get here because David's freaking me out about this thing. It feels like it's, kind of a weird event. And so we shot that last minute. And then the Miss Elizabeth stuff, David has a tattoo on his body of Miss Elizabeth. He loves her. He's always asked me to dress up like her for Halloween. And so it's her Wonder Woman. So it's been like this ongoing theme. And, the directors were like, you have to do it. And I'm more behind the lens or camera, obviously. So I was like, really like, I'm not doing that. There's no way. I'm not coming up with Miss Elizabeth. Like, I'll die. And I don't have that showmanship in me. And so literally like the day before, I went on Etsy and looked up Miss Elizabeth dresses and found a dress and showed up to the Detroit match, was terrified. And when Ric Flair's wife, Wendy, was backstage with me and she gave me a bunch of tips. I might have taken a shot or two of something. And then I went out there and I was like heckling people and heckling Ken Anderson. But again, it was all very organic. Like none of it, all of it happened. And I think hopefully that authenticity is what you feel in the story too, because, it really was an organic sort of experience.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to remind our listeners, the name of the film we've been talking about is You Cannot Kill David Arquette. Okay.
That's a challenge.
It's on video demand. Okay. Apple, Google, Amazon, check it out. I got the opportunity to see it 2 weeks. In fact, we talked about it on our show last week. We did an entire review on it. It was great because as the guys know, I was huge WWE, WWF fan during the time that David Arquette had become champion. So I didn't watch a lot of WCW. I did hear about what happened, and I'm like, oh, well, that's interesting. But I didn't know the storyline of what WCW was doing. Listen, there's tons of storylines that are like, it's great and people hate it. It's great to me, but people hate it. Or there are some that I go, well, that was stupid and people hate. So now that I know the storyline more about what happened, I actually thought it was really good. I was trying to figure out why fans were so upset. And I was challenging the guys on the show. I'm like, so why were you so upset that he was champ. And one of the members on our show, Sin City Steve, said because he was an outsider.
Yeah. And that's what Eric Bischoff said. You know,
Mhm.
we're supposed to bring in outsiders.
Right.
You
And
know?
I'm thinking that's perfect, though, for an outsider to come in. That should make you, it should make you angry to, yes, to go along with the storyline, but to really hate the person
Yeah.
for that. It's like,
I mean, like the hate
Yeah.
is real too. I mean, it followed him for 20 years.
right.
And it was, and I think as the internet progressed and people could comment online about it,
Mhm.
you could always find his name in the middle of a joke. And so
Right.
for anybody, and like David's a highly sensitive person, which is
Sure.
like, so for anybody, just imagine to be trolled, you know, for 20 years over something that, you know, understandably, I get the upset about it. I get like, you know, especially when you see what wrestlers put their bodies through and
Mhm.
understand the level of, you know, David broke 3 ribs. He had an elbow surgery. He
Mhm.
obviously ended up in the hospital from a
Mhm.
death match. That was all, you know, in 1 year. So for people that are doing this for their whole careers, I mean, the amount of stuff that they put their bodies through is so insane. And so I understand the argument of like, he didn't deserve it. I understand all that. On the flip side, it was a promotion for a film and it was supposed to be fun and silly. And,
Sure.
you know, obviously went down the rabbit hole of not fun and silly. But yeah, I mean, I think for him, it just like really weighed heavily on him. He didn't want to be, he wanted to create a love letter to wrestling because he loves it so much. And he didn't want to be a smear on its name. That was really, really, really important.
Right.
And I think at the end, like the Nasty Boys accepting him was a really big honor for him because, you know, to him, that was the full circle moment where it was like, okay, he also like literally bled for wrestling.
Yeah.
So I think he proved himself. I don't know. I'm like,
Well, no, there's no doubt. And a couple things here off of that. One, he did prove himself. If you look at, first of all, being trained by Peter.
oh, he's the best.
Yeah, there's no one better because he has a great mind for it. Getting a chance to do stuff with Dave Marquez and
I love Dave Marquez too. He's a class act, and RJ City class act.
RJ, yeah.
Yeah.
So you know, you get a chance to, and really this is what it's about from this perspective, and that is you do want to be accepted by the boys.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And who doesn't want to, you know, if that's your field, you know, you want to be embraced because it is like a locker room, you know, like you were in high school. And growing up on a commune,
Yeah.
right, you got kind of a different vibe than, you know, going to the locker room in high school and, you know, being harassed because, you know, you got a fat tummy and you have to shower and you're being forced to do all this. And people are nasty and cruel, but you give and you take and you become part of the boy system.
Mhm.
But when you're sensitive and you have a commune background and it's so wonderful, you just want to share the love and be embraced. And it's like,
all he wants is love.
exactly. So it makes sense from that aspect, absolutely, in terms of, you know, that acceptance. The thing with the fans, and this is one of the things that I hope he realizes, is that he did exactly what he was supposed to do.
Yeah.
And that was, he pissed off. He was a heel.
Right.
He pissed everyone off simply because they put the title on him, which is, if you look at what Andy Kaufman did without the internet,
Yeah.
Andy Kaufman did what David did. And that was, we see now from a documentary, basically kind of a timeline of X amount of times that Andy went to Memphis. But that whole year and a half, him and Lawler went all around the Memphis territory and the surrounding areas because it was money.
Yeah.
And that's how you were making the business work. And also you're paying your dues by doing that. And the boys respect you now. And so someone like Kaufman got it all at once. David had to do it in a 20-year
20 years and 20 years and a few hospital stays. Although I will say that his longest lasting injury did come from Lawler himself. Because
really?
Yeah. His neck's never been the same from Lawler. But yeah, I mean, it's true. He really, I think that was it. Like, you know, his 20 years of, you know, so much negativity towards him. And also, again, like, he loves wrestling. You know, it wasn't like he was some person that just got thrown into the wrestling world and was like, I don't know much about wrestling. It was such an obsession and a passion for him. And when he did Ready to Rumble, he was like, I barely even like cared what the movie's about. I saw Macho Man's name in the script and I was like, are you serious? Is he really in this movie? You know, I mean, for him, it was like, you know, meeting your idol, right? Like, you know, and working with your idol. And so I think, and DDP and like, you know, Bischoff and Ric Flair and all these greats that he loves so much. And so I think it's almost worse than if it's like a movie of yours getting panned, right? Like, because he cares so much about wrestling and loves it so much that it's like his passion. And so to have your passion sort of, you know, tainted for so many years. Yeah. And it's funny because a lot of people don't know the story about his, you know, WCW. Like in this film, a lot of people are like, I didn't even know that happened. That weren't wrestling fans, obviously, but those that are wrestling fans, it really followed him in every interview he ever did for the past 20 years. It would always come up, like, you know, like, so I think it weighed so heavily on him.
So let me ask you the $1 million question here, and that was when Ready to Rumble came out, you were about 19-ish.
I don't even think I will say this. My family's from Arkansas originally, and my cousin, who's the financier of this film, of You Cannot Kill David Arquette, is a huge wrestling fan. And when I was about 12, he would make me play with Hulk Hogan dolls in the ring, the WWE, instead of with Barbies, I had like all wrestling dolls. And I would sit with Franklin, whose nickname is Frank the Tank, and we would play with all these wrestling dolls. So I always knew about wrestling, you know, and I always, you know, knew a lot of friends of ours and my own family had an obsession with wrestling. But to answer your question, no, I love to remind David that I'm 10 years younger than him. And so I was, you know, applying to NYU journalism school at that, you know, when Ready to Rumble was out, and I had no idea like what that film was. But I have watched it since, obviously.
You know, and for me too, when it's the only Hollywood premiere I ever went to in 20 years.
Oh, really? Because you're in it. That's awesome. I love it.
Yeah. And you know, the thing too is what I like to think, tying it together with WCW, what if they would have went, let's because at that time Turner Media had their hands all over shit. Let's say that they said, Scott Kahn, we want you to become the champion.
You would have probably said no.
Yeah, like,
you know, like, but and then the funny part is David wanted to make, like, he jokes that You Cannot Kill David Arquette's like the sequel to Ready to Rumble. Like, you can watch Ready to Rumble and then you can watch You Cannot Kill David Arquette. And he asked Scott to be in You Cannot Kill, and Scott's a great friend of his, but Scott's like, no, you know, I'm very private, and you know. But I think that, you know, David was like, you know, always, he never really did things by a formula, right? Like, he was just way more, you know, there's so many funny photos of him wearing crazy Laker outfits to the Laker games, or, you know, dressing up in like some bizarre getup, and, you know, it happens to be like Bob Dylan's suit that he, you know, got at some auction or something. You know what I mean? Like, that's who David, he loves puppets. He loves, you know, clowns. He loves to dress up like a clown. Like, you know, he's so for him, like, this wasn't that far-fetched, right? Like, it wasn't that far-fetched and I think like one of his outfits that he wore in the ring was like somebody famous's suit too. Like, he would collect all these costumes to, you know, like, he just loved it so much. So it wasn't that far-fetched, but no, I think Scott Conn would have been like, no, sorry.
Well, yeah, but,
Not doing that.
but it's an interesting thought that, let's say, for whatever reason, he gets pushed into it. Now you look at Scott Streg, he would have had a total different trajectory.
Yeah.
Because it would have associated him with that film, and it would have been harder, I think, for him to keep his career going. David got a double shot because now you're in this, now you're in a real, between that and like Eight-Legged Freaks, you're in stuff that it has a comic element to it.
Yeah.
But then you also have your comic element, of course, cemented by Scream.
Yep.
So all of a sudden now, not only are you kind of getting pigeonholed and started to look at, but you're also kind of getting fucked because now the people who are making the movies don't understand wrestling.
100%. Didn't get it at all and didn't understand it at all. And we're like, what is he doing? And I think Patricia said it in the film, like it was kind of the first left turn, like where people were like, what is he doing? I don't get it. Now, nowadays you see all sorts of incredible talent on WWE or AEW cameos. Like you see, The Rock is the most famous wrestler turned actor, and John Cena. And that one of the things David loves is that bridge between Hollywood and wrestling, because wrestlers are such incredible actors. They really are, like, they're just amazing. And so he's always like, I want to see, why isn't Ric Flair on a cop show? Ric Flair should be, why aren't all these incredible wrestlers doing more television and movies? But I think, back then people were scratching their heads over it and thought, well, something like this is crazy. Like you can't do that. And so while David will tell you, no, it didn't really impact my career. I think in the film, we kind of, sort of say that in a way, not blaming wrestling at all, because we all love wrestling so much. And it's not really that. It's more the kind of understanding that people just didn't quite get it, didn't understand it. Yeah. And that hate from the wrestling world kind of translated over too into the Hollywood community as well, like of what's going on,
And you mentioned, I'm gonna segue into this because you just mentioned, wanting to see wrestlers in acting roles, and you guys have a film coming out.
Mick Foley's in it.
Yeah, 12-hour shift. This is gonna be fucking awesome.
Mick Foley's the best. I'm obsessed with Mick Foley.
And not only having Mick in the film, but just the concept of the film. It's horrifying, but it's a comedy horror film, right?
Yeah, it is. And Joseph Rudd, do you know Joseph Rudd?
Yeah.
He's in our other film too.
The
Ghost. But fun fact about Mick. So Mick Foley is in 12-Hour Shift, which is a dark comedy. It's set in the 90s, and it's based in Arkansas. It's about a group of nurses stealing organs and selling them on the black market. And Mick Foley's the bad guy, of course. And in one of the scenes when Mick is talking to one of the girls and he's really mad, and he says to one of his guys, come over here. And it's this young kid. That's Ric Flair's stepson, Sebastian. So got like a whole ode to wrestling going on. But Mick, he was incredible in the Peanut Butter Falcon.
Yeah.
Which I love. Like, he's an incredible actor. He's also literally one of the most incredibly humbled, genuine, nicest guys. I don't know. Do you ever see the documentary Becoming Santa Claus? Is it Becoming Santa Claus?
Yeah. I think it's Becoming Santa Claus is what it's called.
An amazing documentary.
Yeah.
And he loves Santa Claus. He has a Santa room in his house, and he writes my children Santa letters. Don't tell my children that. Whoa. And they think that I know Santa Claus. And he writes him beautifully, like on these incredible letters. And we shot 12-Hour Shift in a abandoned hospital in Arkansas, but one of the floors was a rehab facility for, kind of long-term care. And there was, a few young guys in there, and one of them was paralyzed from a car crash. And he had heard Mick was in the building and asked, if he could meet him. And Mick came down to the room, and we were all there. Literally Mick took the shirt off his back and gave it to this guy. It was like, he's just such an incredible person. And all the wrestlers are like that, like Ric Flair, DDP, they're all such incredible people. And the whole wrestling community is one of, closeness and family and taking care of each other and all that stuff. So that part of the wrestling world I really really, really love. And, but I mean, Mick was amazing. He showed up, nailed his lines. He's just like, he's a class act. He's so great.
And it's funny that the reason I when I saw that and I realized, 20 years ago, actually just even a little bit longer than that, somewhere around 99, me and my friends, we were coming up, we were working on something, a sitcom, and one of the things that we wanted to do was give Mick an opportunity to be the father in this sitcom that we were trying to, it didn't get off the ground, but like even us who were basically crazy, just out of college, a couple years kids, saw that potential in him.
Oh, he's amazing.
Yeah, it's because he transcends. And I think, that's something about David that I love, is that to me, when you transcend what you're doing to show who you are, because listen, Bobby De Niro is a great actor, but do you know who Bobby De Niro is?
Totally.
No. And you even said with Scott, that's the same way. Scott's very private and you don't get to see who he is, but I mean, David transcends. And one of the things that we talked about here that you mentioned was mental health. And it's really interesting because I think I'm discovering I didn't get diagnosed until I was 39. So, and all of a sudden everything kind of made sense.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really interesting that a lot of this stuff you're saying about David, I'm the same way. And I think a lot of actors,
a lot of people have reached out to him about it. Yeah, I think a lot of people share, a lot of the same problems and issues. And, David, as you saw, comes from, his parents are incredible, but he also was raised in a pretty chaotic, traumatic upbringing. And, that impacted him for life. And, and he was the youngest. And, so for me, I think, David kind of saying it's okay, I really do want to show like all the things, because I think a lot of people have a preconceived notion about David, about his addiction issues, and he's just got addiction and that's what's going on with him. And I saw him on TMZ or whatever your thing is, but really behind that there's much more rich history and story to like why David is in pain or why David feels the way that he does. And I think that what we wanted to really capture it, and again, not exploiting it, but showing the realness of it and how it impacts him as an actor, as a father, as a husband, as a wrestler, as a person, and then being really brave and laying it all out there. And he's worked on himself much more than I have. I have to say he has a lot of courage. He goes to a lot of therapy. We're very blessed that he's been able to go to doctors and try to really figure out, like, I think in the film you see they're doing brain scans and figuring out like what's wrong with his brain and all these things. So, he really, really tries hard, and it's a lifelong struggle. Like, some days he's great, some days he's not. But I think that part of his, who he is, was really important to share, because it also puts into perspective why he wanted to come back into the wrestling world. It wasn't it wasn't, a bit, it wasn't shtick, it wasn't, the funny part is all the promoters were like, we hear his acting career is drying up and this is what he's doing we're like, no, David didn't go out and make a bunch of money wrestling, you know what I mean? And in his previous wrestling career, he donated it all to the, family. So he was doing this because, in his heart and in his soul was this pain and he wanted to, come to terms with it. And then in the process, like as a person, as an actor, he says he learned a lot about acting from wrestling, like slowing down time, when you're in the ring, which I can't speak to this because I had my one short-lived career as Miss Elizabeth or Miss Christina. But he said when you're in there, like really slowing down the time and being present, in that moment when you're in a match, like there's something about that has really translated for him. And he's starting Scream in the coming weeks. And it
Mhm.
feels like I've watched him kind of become a more competent person and actor as a result of all this wrestling. So it's just going to be interesting to see how that's reflected as well in his career as he goes forward too.
I want to promote the movie we were just talking about, 12-Hour
Yes.
Shift. It is released next week, October 2nd, correct?
Yeah.
And video on demand. Is that where it's going to be released on?
Yeah, and I believe digital. And yeah, it's stars David and Mick Foley and Angela Bettis and Chloe Farnworth and Nakia Gamby-Turner. And again, we shot it all in Arkansas, where I'm originally from, with HCT Media. They're from Arkansas as well. Incredible group of filmmakers. They shoot everything. They did all the, Matt Glass, who's a part of HCT, composed all the music. But it's really fun. It kind of is like it's all set in the 90s. So it's that 90s campy kind of vibe.
Right.
And it's out there. I mean, it's a dark comedy. So it's like, I said in the film, I've never really watched Scream because I can't watch horror films, which is to this day, I hate horror films. Yet I'm suddenly producing dark comedies and horror films.
Right.
But it's a fun, wild ride. And I think people that love the 90s are going to have fun with this one because there's just some fun, throwbacks and stuff like that. But yeah, we're really excited about it. And, we were shooting all of that so while we were shooting 12-Hour Shift, we filmed the final match with the Nasty Boys during that time too. So we hopped over from Arkansas over to Detroit to finish the wrestling documentary about the same time. So I hope you guys like it. It's kind of crazy. And David's he was kind of has his body he was really in shape during it. So it's his sort of hot moment.
Right.
He's very proud of it. He's like, I was looking really good. I lost all that weight because this is right at the height when he was training.
Yeah.
With that, getting a chance to work in Arkansas, and I think I saw something that you said about the fact that, Arkansas is basically a fairly untapped, state when it comes to using it for films. What was it like for you to, come back home and basically, help, a little bit of the economy in the state? And
Sure. Yeah. I mean, gosh, Arkansas is such a beautiful state. It's the natural state. That's what they call it. And there, True Detective season 3 shot there. I don't know if you guys watched that show on HBO.
Yeah.
But and I think that show did a lot for Arkansas. Really, Arkansans really saw wow, the halo effect of filmmaking, because when you bring a film into, a state or a community, that halo effect of the businesses that, are impacted by the hotels that are used, the food, the catering, etc. So for 12-Hour Shift, it was a real pleasure to come home and make that. And then we shot Ghost of the Ozark at the beginning of the summer during COVID. We worked with the film commissioner and the governor and the Arkansas Health Department to get approved. Now, we were an indie film, so we were much smaller than a big studio production. And that stars David and Tim Blake Nelson. And that one was really a pleasure too, because, during the pandemic, obviously a lot of hotels and businesses and restaurants were shut down. So to be able to use those hotels and rent out the entire floor of the hotel for the cast and crew to quarantine together and isolate together before working, and use all the local businesses. And HCT Media built an Ozark Western town, a set in Arkansas for this film, but they, again, were able to use local resources. And so that halo effect of filmmaking is really exciting. It's really exciting to bring jobs to Arkansas. And also, it's like wrestlers who have to travel around and miss their families. It's nice when you can keep people that are living in Arkansas working in Arkansas. So crews, camera, photographer, audio, a lot of them travel to Atlanta or whatever surrounding places to work. So to be able to stay in your kind of state. So we continue to, we plan on continuing to make films in Arkansas. And we also love Memphis. We're obsessed with Memphis. I think Memphis is one of the greatest places ever. And so there's just all these great towns and places we want to continue to shoot and have some fun in. And Memphis is a big wrestling community, as you guys know.
Sure.
Lawler still lives there, right? Doesn't he?
Right. Yeah. And the coolest thing about that, you take a town like Memphis, it's so
obsessed with Memphis.
It's like, it's so eclectic. You wouldn't even think that a city like that is just like, you can find so many different cool things.
The history of Memphis is
Oh,
best. I mean, I think it's such an incredible place. I think that filmmaking in Memphis is a really interesting place to be making films. And I think that, the city itself just visually is a character, right?
yeah,
Like Memphis is a character. And, where we were shooting for 12 Hours, Jonesboro, which is, we would use the Memphis airport. So like I would pick Mick Foley up at the Memphis airport and drive him to Jonesboro. And there's a famous hotel there called the Peabody Hotel,
yeah,
where they have the duck walk every day at like 5 p.m. It's just incredible. Like,
yeah,
so, but if you can really I think that's one thing that's, David and I just did a road trip with our kids and we stopped in a bunch of different cities. We actually bought a house in Nashville because we're wanting to make more films out, in this area.
yeah.
We drove back to LA and we stopped in all these different places with our kids along the way. And I think, that's been a real, usually you're flying and working and whatever. So, as unfortunate as everything is right now, slowing life down and taking a road trip with your kids and stopping in all these great cities along the way has been really fun. And, like now I'm obsessed with New Mexico too. And like all these places I've been to, I've traveled through or whatever, but like Albuquerque, and we did Route 66 and, just like all these great places. And I think that to me is also something that I love about wrestling is like, you meet so many, when you go to a wrestling match, there can be generations of families there at that wrestling match, right? Like it's generational and there's just so many different characters and people. And it's such a interesting, community, both on the fan side and the wrestling side.
Yeah.
And then when you get to travel and see all of that and all the different cities and meet all the people that love wrestling so much, it sort of feels the same as that road trip that we took where we just got to, have a little fun and enjoy the United States, even though it's been a crazy, crazy time.
Christina, so let me ask you, would you say that you are a wrestling fan in terms of you're Monday nights you're watching WWE, Wednesday you're watching AEW?
AEW. I'm obsessed with Cody Rhodes and Brandy Rhodes. Okay, Brandy used to be a figure skater, and I was a figure skater, so I'm kind of I'm obsessed with Cody. I think Cody is so scary, and their dog, and like I follow them on Instagram because I have to know what their life is like behind. Like I just want to go and hang out with them. Don't they live in Atlanta or somewhere? I just want to go and hang out their house and see what they're like when they're not, doing their thing. But Brandy and I need to maybe just have a figure skating duel off at some point. So
I like that.
I've been really loving watching Brandy too. Mm-hmm. Like as a woman, she's just such a badass, and she's like you're watching her grow so much on AEW, and I just really enjoy it. All except that one time when she got like just completely pummeled, and I thought she was like, I don't know if that was an accident or not. Do you remember? It was like a few months back where where Cody hit her really hard. And I was like, oh my God, I know wrestling's not fake, but that looked really scary. But I typically watch AEW. David obsessively watches everything. Like I said the other night to him, I'm like, no offense, because I love wrestling.
Yeah.
Don't you sometimes just like need to watch something else? He's like, no, it relaxes me. And I'm like, what? Because it doesn't relax me when I watch it. I'm like, what do you mean it relaxes you? He's like, it just really relaxes me. So
yeah,
he watches it to relax. I watch it just because I enjoy it. I love AEW. I literally think Jungle Boy is it. He is a star. He is going to be in Hollywood films. He is going to be the biggest wrestling star there is. He is so amazing. He is such a sweet kid. He is the most grounded guy I've ever met. His, family obviously is incredible, and his dad was unbelievable. But I think that Jungle Boy is just extraordinary. So I really, I've been also watching AEW and Peter too. Like, by the way, all these guys, Jack got signed right after the death match. Like that was the turning point in his career.
Right.
So as horrible as that was, because he was in the car driving David to the hospital, he was like, that night was like literally the turn in his career, and he was signed to AEW right after. So for me, watching Jungle Boy, grow has been I just love it. So I really enjoy watching that. I love watching Peter just because I love him so much, and Peter's such a great talent. So I typically try to watch the guys that I know, and but I do think like if Brandy ever wants to have like a skate off, has that ever happened in wrestling where they put like an ice rink at a wrestling match?
You know what? The competition is so real right now. There's a possibility that might happen. And
the worst part about that is you actually got my brain going.
Yeah.
Did they ever do that? I don't think so. And
I think so.
You know what you need? Go reach out to DDP. Reach out to Paige, because Paige is Paige is literally, I think, essentially Cody's, godfather, essentially, and just say, hey,
I love Cody Rhodes. I just think I went to All In Chicago, and it was just insane. Like, it was just so insane. Everything about it was insane. And, I just was so blown away by it. And I think that, it's cool to see somebody like him take a legacy, right? Like, and take that legacy and do something extraordinary with it. So I really enjoy watching him, and I just love Brandy so much. It's so fun. And I mean, again, I am literally, Jungle Boy is my boy. I am the president of his fan club. I'm his publicist. I'll be his manager, like whatever he wants, because I just love him so much.
What's the chance to? Oh, go ahead, man.
Oh no, I was gonna say he's one of the sweetest kids too.
Yeah.
Yes, like he's so, he is so healthy too. Like, I think David just said he takes care of himself. He takes care of his body. He's really grounded. He's not out on the scene, like he is legit, a star in the making. And his dad was such an incredible person, and his mom's an incredible sister, like his whole family. They're just an incredible group of people. But I think, David and Luke lived together back in the day. They were roommates. And David's mom loved having Luke around because, he was from the South. And so he was like, hey, what do you want me to do? You want me to fix things? I'll do whatever you want. Like, I'm here to help you. It's true Southern, gentleman,
right.
Hospitality. And David was on a show called The Outsiders, and Luke got a pilot, and David's show got canceled, and Luke's pilot was 90210. And then he went on to become, Then he moved out of the house. They were no longer roommates after that.
but for really quick, I'm sorry, DJ, but
no, man.
You know what really the coolest thing about that is that, he moved out of the house, he went, but that if David's mom wanted something fixed, all you had to do is call Luke and
he would come back. I always tell this story with Charlie R, who's 6 now, our son. We had a christening for Charlie, and it was in LA, and Alexis, David's sister, who's no longer with us, who I just loved so much. She was really good friends with Luke. Her and Luke were very, very close. And she wasn't feeling well at the time, and she couldn't come. And she said, this was like a small family thing, at their church. And she said, I'm going to send a friend of mine because I'm not feeling well. And I was like, okay, was that like to send a friend to a christening? Like, but it was Luke. And we were like, oh. He was like, he was just such a great guy, and he was just such a sweetheart, and, just an incredibly humble, grounded, beautiful man. And so I think, you see a lot of that in Jack, which is really special. And you also just see him, and he comes out and he's a star. You know what I mean? Like, you just feel it. So I'm really excited to watch his career just continue to grow, and, see him in big movies, and, watch out The Rock.
I was just gonna jokingly ask, what if Tony Khan contact David and say, I think we can use that.
He would
do it. And would you be okay with it? That's the main question.
I mean, listen, like, given how much it means to him, clearly, It's sort of like, and I love wrestling too. I really am a fan of it now. You know, when we started this whole process, I was kind of like, again, reluctant about it all, but I love wrestling. I love all the wrestlers. I love all the wrestlers' wives. I love, you know, I just love everybody. So for me, I mean, granted, like, I would prefer him not to break ribs or do anything that would like jeopardize his health or end up back in the hospital.
Right.
But yeah, I think, you know, if somebody called him from AEW, if anybody called him and was like, hey, you want to, David would be there with bells on. Like, you're getting, he's a fan. He'll always show up.
I don't see why they don't. I see great storylines in that.
I forgot, after the death match, you know, so when he went to the hospital and they stitched him up, he wasn't really great the next 24 hours later. He was having an infection started and he wasn't feeling well. And I was like, David, you got to stay home. And he's like, no, I have tickets. I have to go to the Staples Center. I have to go see wrestling. And he went to like NXT or something 24 hours after the death match.
Wow.
It's like his neck like this. And I was like, that shows how much he loves wrestling. Like, and then he went back to the hospital right after. He had to leave to the hospital because he wasn't feeling good. And he had to get back. He was admitted to the hospital again. So,
you know, you just brought up a very, I think that to just cap everything off, they need to bring him in and just put the AEW title on him.
Oh, crazy. Wait, by the way, people will go nuts. I don't know if it would start another 20 years. Like, David might die. David's going to be 100 years old, and we're going to still be shitting on him again, all over again, if that were to happen. But it would be so good. Like, it just would be so good. It would come full circle for him. But, oh, my God. Like, can you imagine if he had another 20 years of this? I don't think he can be 75 and come back.
Oh, no. You know, and that's really a credit. If you look at a movie career or a television career, a lot of times you'll get typecast as, in terms of movies, as this type, or especially in TV, you get associated with a character and, you know, you're Herman Munster for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
But with wrestling, and it's a different animal. It's like being a stand-up comic.
Totally.
People associate basically you with what you're playing, especially if you use your real name. And when David comes in and it's David Arquette, now you have a poison in the mouth of the people who watch the product for all these years now, because of the fact is they can't disassociate, you know, this asshole who's coming in and spouting off and is such a dick and he's doing his job, and yet that is now in their eyes, that's David Arquette.
Yeah, totally.
You know, totally. if he would have been under a mask as, you know, El Cid blah blah blah, you know, people would have never blinked.
Yeah,
if they would have known if they would not have known it was him.
Yeah,
that's the most interesting thing, because, you know, if David went and did stand up, and look at, you know, someone like Michael Richards, when, you know, he goes and he uses, you know, off-color terms, that was it. It was associated with him, and that's it. And, you know, that's the toughest thing, and that's why I think when you look at that need to be accepted, it's so interesting, because, like you said, his comfort, the thing he wanted to go do was watch wrestling. And I do it every night when I go to sleep. That's what I have on, because
you too. Like, what is it with the calming wrestling that calms you down, huh? That's why he loves it so much. I mean, you know, a lot of the fans say the same thing, you know. I mean, one of the super fans in the film, Brendan, who I love so much, and he was in, and you know, he was at the Chicago match among many other ones, and he said the same thing. Like, wrestling for him is something that, you know, helps him feel happy and good and calm and, you know, all those things, because it is sort of a world that you go into, right? And you become a part of, and it for David, like that spark has never left, you know, even when people were mad at him, even when he was in the hospital, he was still watching wrestling because he loves it so much. And it's we have a bunch of basset hounds, you know, the dogs.
Right. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me, like, I grew up with basset hounds. My childhood, like, I see a basset hound and I become this child all over again. And I'm like, oh my God, it's a basset hound. That's wrestling for David. So we kind of joke, like, my love is I see a basset hound and I go, oh, I feel safe and comforted and warm. And he watches wrestling and suddenly he feels like the world's okay.
So let me ask then, you know, in Beyond the Mat, Mick Foley, you know, had one of the most brutal matches anyone has had, where he took all these chair shots to the head, and see his wife, and at that time, Dewey and Nicole were just little kids.
Yeah.
And we're so, you know, traumatized. How much of, because, you know, David, I mean, I'm sorry, you know, taking a light bulb over and over. I mean, the shit he did was serious, man.
Crazy.
It was real. It wasn't
How
bullshit.
much the kids know?
Yeah.
Well, Coco really got into it and upset about all that stuff.
Yeah.
You know, she's a teenager. I will say that RJ City stays with us when he's in town. And so our 3-year-old Gus, his hair is a little long right now. And he's like, can you do my hair like RJ City? And so my kids are obsessed with RJ City and with Jungle Boy. They know a little bit about it just because obviously Dad came home injured from, you know, that night. But, you know, the night the death match happened, typically I would have been there because, you know, I was producing this whole thing, but the kids were both sick. So I stayed home that night, thank God, because I would have ended up in the ring with Nick Gage myself. No, just kidding. That's not a challenge. I don't want to challenge. Please don't. I'm scared to death of them. But you know, you know, it was sort of just that Daddy got hurt, and, you know, Daddy had to go to work, and it's all, you know, okay. But on the flip side of it, they love like RJ City and Dalton Castle and Jungle Boy. And so, you know, I'll never forget, maybe a year ago I was at a parent-teacher conference, and the teacher's like, oh, you know, your son Charlie's so sweet, and he's very, you know, somebody gets hurt, he wants to play doctor and bring the Band-Aid. And I'm like, oh, great to hear, because we have a wrestling ring in our backyard and a bunch of wrestlers over all the time, and I'm always worried about how that's impacting them. And Jungle Boy would come over all the time and use our ring, and Charlie would go out and watch them and get in at the very end, and I'm like, I'm so sorry. And he's like, no, it's really cool. So Charlie has this love developing with David. And so the teacher was like, he's so sweet, da da da. And then I was like, great. And I went out into the play yard, and Charlie went up to a kid, and he's like, I'm going to wrestle RJ City when I get back to my house. This kid on the playground. And I was like, oh my God, I hope he's not like doing that a lot at school. You know, where he's like, you know.
I'm sure he is.
Cutter. Have you ever heard of it? You know, like, because he, you know, he is obsessed with it. And and then our 3-year-old Gus, he does this wrestling move now. He's like, I'm a wrestler. So I think I'm training him young, unfortunately. So
expect some calls pretty soon from the principal to come in. Okay, just be prepared.
Body pile driver, some kid. I'm like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. It's just wrestling. But yeah, I mean, they love it, and they also don't. They just think their dad's a wrestler. By the way, they don't like or anything else. They're like, oh, my dad's a wrestler.
Yep. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, it's so fun. I mean, it's a, you know, and two, for me, I just like love seeing all the female wrestlers that are, you know, out there in the world. Like, there's so many great women that are doing it and talented. And again, that's why I'm like obsessed with Brandy, because I just love seeing these just awesome women kind of taking it over too. And even on the WWE side with like Stephanie and, you know, just the incredible talent, and having a woman, you know, running that organization too, you know, even though it's a legacy thing. I mean, it's just cool to see just wrestling's a wild, wild world, and it's, you know,
Yeah.
once you're in it, and you're sucked into it, and you can never leave.
Exactly. Now, Christina, I found some fun facts about you. Tell me if they're just true or not. Let me see if I'm on the right page, okay? Is it true that you are the first girl child in 5 generations of your family?
That's true.
Wow.
Yeah, that's true. It's all men. Maybe that's why I did so well with all these wrestling promoters. I don't know. And all the men. It was actually like a lot of men too in the production. We had another Q&A the other night, and they were like, I think Christina made us cry during like the editing process because I might have kicked everybody out of the of the editing room. But yeah, so yeah, that's true. And now I have a baby girl cousin, so she's, you know, second in our family, but it's all men.
Wow. All right. Let me ask you this. You got a chance to interview Bill Clinton, Hillary Clinton, and Peter Jennings?
Oh my gosh, so this is a great story. So my uncle was Bill Clinton's chief of staff, his first chief of staff in the White House. And so when I was, so when I went to the White House as a kid, I had this really interesting experience, and I was like going to the restroom, and I saw all these lights and cables and everything. And I walked into, I think it was like the China room, and there was Peter Jennings, and he was setting up an interview with Bill Clinton. And I was, you know, super young. And so the Secret Service didn't pounce on me. They were like,
yeah,
so you can stay here for a second. And I remember being so blown away because, you know, the bigness of it all, like with all those lights and cables, and there was crews everywhere. And Peter Jennings was there. And, you know, of course I recognized him because I also watched the evening news that my parents would allow me to watch. You know, that was part of my generation still. It wasn't all the internet. And I was like, oh my God, it's Peter Jennings. And I always followed him and Diane Sawyer. I was just loved them both. And so that was the moment in my life where I really was like, okay, I want to go and be a journalist. Like I really want to be in news. Yeah. And so when I went to NYU journalism school, and because of our Arkansas connection, I was a little ambitious, and for one of my assignments, they said you have to interview a newsworthy person. So I took it upon myself to contact President Bill Clinton and ask him if I could interview him. And it took him a second to get back to me, but they allowed me to come interview him in his Harlem office. It was the worst interview I've ever done ever in my entire life. I was first off so nervous. My voice was like as high as, it sounded like I had just ingested helium or something. It was like, hi. I was like, are you a breakfast person or a dinner person? I was like 19, and he was like, what? And so I was like, oh, your office is really nice. Don't you love it here? And then I was like, and then I'd ask him some like serious political question that kind of didn't really wasn't the right question to be asked. You know, it was the whole thing. It was so, but I put it on my newsreel, my demo reel that I would send out. So I put it on my demo reel, and I sent it out to all these news directors around the country. Yeah. And, you know, I was like, for whatever reason, I sent it off to like LA thinking I'd get in the top 5. Come on. And I was getting like letters back from news directors like, this is the worst tape I've ever seen in my entire life. But how did you get President Clinton on your tape? Right. What? And so... and I wish I would have framed one of the letters, because one of them was so harsh from a news director. He was like, who do you think you are sending me this tape? But then, long story short, I finally got my first gig in news, and then I ended up in Little Rock, Arkansas on KTV as a general assignment reporter. And when I was at NYU, I interned for Hillary Clinton when she was senator, which was an extraordinary experience, except I learned I'll never go into politics because it's not my thing. But I really, it was a very profound experience. Sure. Working in that level, and I was, it's heartbreaking, a lot of the things that you want to fix and can't, and, just the way politics works. Yeah. But anyways, when I was at KTV, I contacted her chief of staff, who I'd become friends with, and I was like, can we do a 3-part series about her? Because she really hadn't done interviews since she left Arkansas, and so we did a 3-part series on her, and it was, I went to DC and interviewed her. It was really cool. And I think that, that interview helped me, landed me my next job in Dallas, Texas. And then I went on to local news in LA and Entertainment Tonight after that. And that's sort of how my career path built. But yeah.
Right. I had two more.
My favorite interview of all time was Tom Cruise, though. He's like the nicest guy.
Oh, I'm sure.
Yes.
Tom Cruise and Oprah. Oprah's a good one too.
You know what amazes me at Tom Cruise, really, sorry DJ, but
yeah.
I of course you hear he's so tiny. You hear this. But when you see him for the first time, it's like, no, he's tiny.
But the best is we interviewed him. I was on Entertainment Tonight. He, when you do interviews with celebrities, sometimes you can wait for hours.
Yeah.
Hours and hours. Like if you do a red carpet, you can sit there for like 6 hours before anybody shows up. And even on sets, like with a movie, you can wait for hours for people, and it's not fun. Let me say that.
Right.
But he was 5 minutes late, and he was like, "I'm so sorry, I'm late." And we were like, "What? You're 5 minutes late?" He was like, "Do you mind if I just go and get a water real quick?" And we were like, "Yeah, you can go get a water. That's okay." And it's like Tom Cruise asking us if he can go get a water. He's like, "So I'm so sorry. Okay, let me just, I'm ready." And we were like, 5 minutes. It was amazing. And Oprah was like that too, where she just is like so nice to everybody, so sweet, and like it kind of makes you feel so special when you're in her presence. It's like those kinds of things were always really fun when you got to interview really nice people and walk away like, gosh, no wonder they're so famous, who they are, because they're so incredible. And so I always enjoyed that. I always, like, if I could have ever interviewed somebody, I wish I could have interviewed Whitney Houston. She's my favorite of all time. That would have been an awesome one.
Yeah. Well, I got two more for you.
Or Macho Man.
Oh.
Miss Elizabeth. I feel like I wish I could have gotten to know her too, because like going through all the archives of her, just all the photos and the videos and everything. I love Miss Elizabeth.
Yeah. All right, I got two more for you, and then I'm done. I'm going to give it all to Matt Michaels here. All right. Is it true you cast for The Young and the Restless?
No. Okay, you ready? So here's the story.
Okay.
I have never acted a day in my life, right?
Okay.
I'm not an actor. I'm a terrible actor if you ever tried to get me to act. When I was on Entertainment Tonight, they had me go and do a story on The Young and the Restless because it's all under the CBS umbrella.
Okay.
Right.
And then they were like, when you do the story, you're going to have to do a scene as a reporter. And I was like, okay. And so it was part of the news story, right? Like we were doing a promo piece, whatever, but then they put me in a scene and I was like, sir, I asked some reporter question. I don't even remember what the actor, who it was, or what the storyline was. So then on IMDb, my credit comes up, Young and the Restless actress. And I was like, what? How do I get that off my thing? Because I went to journalism school, reporter. I did win an Emmy for news reporting.
Right.
And I'm like, and no offense to Young and the Restless. It's a great show. I actually grew up watching it. My mom loves soap operas. I love Young and the Restless, but I'm not an actor.
Right.
And I kind of feel bad for the Young and the Restless actors that I'm getting credited as anyways. So it took me a while. I kept contacting IMDb and I was like, I'm sorry, but I'm not an actor on The Young and the Restless. Is there any way we could change that? So finally I had to prove that I did a story on it and I wasn't an actor in The Young and the Restless.
What?
But no, but I love that you asked that because I actually got introed one time. They were like, and an actress from The Young and the Restless, Christina.
Right.
And I was like,
yeah, I looked a little odd when I saw that. I'm like, let me ask if this was.
No,
was true.
And literally it's like David in wrestling. It's been trailing me for 20 years that I'm a Young and the Restless actress and I'm not. But
you know what you're going to have to do?
I love that you asked me that.
You know what? Okay, here we go. And I'm printing money for you right now. What you do is you follow for the next year, you learning, going to acting class and auditioning and just trying to put it behind you.
I'm going to win an Oscar. That's my goal. I'm going to become an Oscar award-winning actress. I'm going to train. I'm going to go to all the schools around the country like David.
Mm-hmm.
That's the sequel.
I would just say, listen, not even the Oscar, but to just deliver a minimum 5-line, just a minimum 5-line, and just I mean, that to me that would be a hysterical.
David will tell you I'm the worst actress. David will be like, she's the worst. Not only that, because like one time we shot something together where they wanted us to do a promo, and it was like you have to act, and I was like, oh no, I can't do. I mean, I can deliver you a line, but no. And David does his thing, and I was mortified. But when I did come out as Miss Christina, because I had a shot or two, and I don't drink anything, and I had a shot or two, I like became a character, but I think a lot of that also had to do with so many people were yelling at me, and then Wendy, Rick's wife, like amped me up and told me exactly what to do. And then when I saw Ken Anderson, I was like up in his face, and he was like, whoa, what are you doing? Like, you were so nice to me before.
Was this exactly?
Don't mess with my husband. And Ken was like, oh my God, who is she?
Did he just go? I didn't think you could act.
No, he did. I think if there's a moment in one of the frames where he's like, what is she doing? Because I was just supposed to come out like kind of in wave in the dress and like go to the side. And I came out, I was like, stuff you, Ken Anderson. Don't touch David. Don't mess with his neck. And then of course he like hit him in the neck, and I was like, no. I mean, the whole thing was so crazy. And I don't think anybody expected that of me. It was really fun.
So just to show how hardworking you are, your film already just came out of You Cannot Kill David Arquette. Okay. Yeah. Then we got 12-Hour Shift. That's coming out this Friday, October 2nd.
Correct.
Now, is this true in post-production? Ghost of the Ozarks?
Yeah, that's in post-production.
Okay.
Ghost of the Ozarks. Yep. We're editing that right now.
Okay.
And then another cool project, David, we started a documentary company called XTR, and we're producing the Magic Johnson documentary, which is really exciting.
My favorite basketball player of all time. And seriously.
Just an incredible person.
Isn't he the freaking
incredible person? And just lights up a room. Yep. And for David, even though he was born in Virginia, he really moved to LA when he was a baby. Yeah. So for him, like, this is a pinch me moment, because LA is part of his DNA. And so, he was really,
mine's too.
And and he's a huge Lakers fan.
Yes.
So that's really, really exciting. And I think we love to do documentaries. That's my passion, and David really enjoys it. So I think we're, still going to produce documentaries together, and then, he gets to go off and do Scream here soon, which is exciting for
him.
Awesome. How, for you, translating your journalism into going into the editing room when it comes to documentaries, you obviously have that experience on how to tell the story with something that is a real life situation. What's the difference for you as a producer on a movie, looking at the dailies and trying to see how that comes together? That's
a good question. Gosh, I think 12-Hour Shift was I never read a script. I wasn't a feature person. I love movies, but I always came from that news kind of background. So there's an element of like news and journalism. One of the things I always say about local news is it's such incredible training, probably similar to what you guys do, where you kind of do it all yourselves, and you're the ones that are telling the story. And you're the ones that are coming up with things and contacting your, interview subjects and all that kind of stuff. So that part of it is very similar in scripted, like you're the kind of 24/7, always doing it all yourself. Like that's all very similar. I think for me, I'm still learning a lot on the feature side. Like, it's just a whole, from casting to scripts to, shot list to all of it, it's still a big learning curve for me. So I'm still learning a lot of that. I feel like I'm in high school on it.
Sure. Yeah.
But it's been, like 12 Hour was a great experience because I did everything. I was, producing it, but I was also like an assistant on set, and I was doing this.
Yeah.
I was, doing legal and SAG paper. I mean, it was just, you learn so much doing that. And I think for me too, David's always been not only on camera, but he produces and he directs. And
Right.
so that idea of kind of always sort of, you never can just stay the same in this business, right? Like you could never just do one thing. I think for David, it's like he always went out and whether it was wrestling or he became a certified Bob Ross instructor, he started a nightclub in LA. Like, he does all this crazy stuff, but it's really about always just kind of transforming yourself and keeping yourself busy and creative. And so that's been, really exciting with some of these films. And I'm working on a few other scripted projects right now, which is really exciting. So, I'm really, really enjoying it, but
staying busy.
I'm learning a lot about my creativity during this. I'm always like, David's a creative, and he's like, no, you're creative too. And I'm like, okay, maybe. So, so that's all been really, really fun. But yeah, I mean, it's, I think filmmaking in general, it's just a hard business. Like making a film is really, really hard. I joke that the wrestling documentary was harder than my 2 births of my kids because it was just such a grueling experience.
Yeah.
So much blood, sweat, and tears that I didn't have in the delivery room.
Yeah.
What I mean? So, it's like you really put your heart and soul into these things. And when they come out and people like it, it feels really good. And, people don't like it, doesn't feel very good, but
but that's a fascinating point, and that's a great comparison because I know that I've always felt this way when I'm producing something, whether it had been as a casting producer or as producing content. The thing is that it is your baby.
Yeah.
And you hate when it comes out and people reject it, and sometimes, the most rejected becomes your most prized because,
Totally, yeah.
Everyone didn't like it, but, it's like the black sheep in my family, I'm going to protect it. But then you get praise for something that, maybe you didn't see that in your kid. You didn't see them becoming a success and they hit it big. It's amazing how...
you never can predict it,
Yeah.
It's like, David always calls it the Hollywood lottery, with things where it's like, you just never know what people are going to love and hate. Same with like his wrestling moment. You never could have predicted people are going to hate it so much, right? Like,
right.
And so I think, but that's what's cool too about, I just feel so blessed to be able to create. Like that part for me is really wonderful. I love being a mom, and I'm lucky I get to work from home with my kids right now. And, but I think that whole kind of creating content and art, telling stories, and storytelling, all of that is such a big passion for me. So I feel very fortunate I get to continue to do it, albeit, one of these stories was a near-death experience for my husband. So, but it was a story that we had to tell.
Let me ask you, as established in like the beginning of the film, David is talking about, basically having the drought, the long years of, rejection, auditions, the process. I have been through it for, 25 years of my life or so. Could you, knowing how you are personally and your feelings, could you take an acting aside, let's say you were a great actress, but could you take that kind of constant?
I don't think so. And I think acting, I think David said acting is the most brutal sport or something like that once, because I think a lot of people see the glamour side and the great side of it, but the other side of it, it's you're criticized all the time, essentially, a lot of the times, right? And I think I saw something on Instagram, like Brie Larson, is it the actress's name?
Yeah.
She was reading through all the auditions she's done and the roles she didn't get, like big ones, you know, and you're thinking, oh gosh, she has to still audition. David auditions all the time. And as he's gotten older, he gets more nervous. He can't audition. He like becomes a sweating mess because he gets so terrified of the process.
Right.
You think like the more you do it, the older you get, the easier you get. No, it's the total opposite. But I think for him, like, yeah, it's like if you're in school and you're always getting an F on things, right? Or something in that you just feel so, okay, well, I got to work harder. And then you continue to get like, you know, a bad grade and you're like, well, I'm doing everything I feel, you know, so that part's really hard. And I think that's the reason why David has always done other things too, right? Like creatively, whether that's, you know, again, wrestling or, you know, the art is a big thing for him. He's an artist. He loves to paint. He, you know, that's really important to him. So I think for him, he's always had to find other things to do, even during kind of the, you know, darker periods of his acting career. You know, David's a working actor. So is his whole family. Like they're all artists. They're all working actors. They always have been. So he's always working. He's always doing indies. He's always doing creative things. You know, this year he had Spree come out, which was at Sundance this year, which is a really awesome film with Joe Keery from Stranger Things. Yeah. He has 12 Hour, you know, this documentary, and then he has another film called Jackie Ryan, or is it Blackjack? The Story of Jackie Ryan, and among a bunch of other films. So like this year has been a really interesting year for him. Whereas like the past, you know, few years, he hasn't had as much coming out. But it just shows the kind of ebbs and flows of acting and the roller coaster ride. Whereas like a steady 9-to-5 job where you go in every day, it's, you know, you have your job, you know what your purpose is. You know, for him, he has to kind of, you know, keep his mind focused when that purpose isn't there. You know what I mean? And it's so important for his overall health too. And everything, his anxiety, his depression, all of it. Like he has to keep himself balanced. So he definitely picked a tough industry to be in, you know, where there's a lot of criticism.
But it's true. It's true. It's funny though, you know, I think that you kind of nailed it on the head too by saying that you got to put that stuff in check. I don't know why I love acting other than I feel most comfortable in my own skin when I'm engaged in doing something creative.
Yeah, I think that's for a lot of people. You know, creativity really soothes the soul and makes you feel something, and that is different than anything really, right? You know, it's like same with being a parent. And like I always heard, oh, you know, when you have kids and when you become a mom, you know, that experience, I never really understood that until you're a mom and have children. It's the same thing with creating. It's like there's something about it that just makes you feel a certain way, and it's very special.
Yeah, and the word creation, you know, goes to both. That's the coolest thing about that. So I'm gonna wrap on this this note. So speaking about rejection and auditions, it was 1998, and I think I know it was on the strip, on Sunset Strip. It might have been the Roxy that they were doing this. I forget, but they were some company was reviving Rocky Horror.
Oh, you saw David in Rocky Horror?
So I go and looking backstage west, and I'm like, oh shit, Rocky Horror, awesome. Well, I am very much a Meatloaf type. I got a honestly fucking phenomenal voice, and that's what the audition. That's what, when I finished singing Hot Patootie, they were like, that was fucking amazing. And they're like, I mean, you're great and everything. And I'm like, I'm riding on a high. I'm like, man, I nailed that. Everything's good. And I think about 2 weeks later, oh, David Arquette's got the role. Thanks. Thank you. Yep.
Okay. You know, I found a photo of him. I mean, I wish I could have seen that show. I just wish I could have seen him. But I have a photo somewhere I have to dig up. But I am dying right now. That is the best story of all time.
And him and I should never have been in the same category for any role. That's the fucked up thing.
Wait, I'm going to tell him the story. This is so awesome. That is amazing. What? Isn't that funny? It's such a small world.
Yeah.
Isn't it a small world? Would you have ever thought we'd be having this conversation?
Nope.
I was like,
I haven't
see the play with him in it.
It was phenomenal.
Oh, good.
It was phenomenal. It was great. It was everything I expected, except for I expected me to be there instead of him.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it was
literally you made my day with that story. It was so good.
Oh man. So
that's awesome.
What a great story. Oh my God. That is so funny.
Oh man. On that note, I'm gonna have to wrap things up because I got tears and now I got memories and now I got depression.
Oh my gosh. I love it so much. He's gonna love that story.
To everyone listening, please take the time to watch the documentary. Please buy it. I know renting's very easy, but honestly, compare the rental price to the buying price. Just own it because it's worth it. Yeah, absolutely. And please check out the movies that are coming out. DJ mentioned them all. We'll promote them on our social media as well.
Mm-hmm.
And thank you all for watching and listening. Thank you especially, Christina, for being a part of this.
Thank you for having me. You guys are awesome. I'm so happy to have connected. And thank you guys so much for watching the film. What a fun time this was.
Thank you so much. And
if we're ever in Vegas, we know where to find you.
Oh, absolutely. And listen, if you guys want to come out to Vegas and, get the bad boy treatment, we'll take care of you guys.
Absolutely.
For you viewers and listeners, thank you very much. And we'll see you again next